This is the universe, flat, and that is the earth. And all of these are lands, terrains, an expansion of water, land, expanding in all directions of the universe. A flat plane of existence. Before the division of heaven and earth. Before that division, it was all heaven. If you go to the Tao, it says, there was something formless yet complete. Formless, had no form, no shape, but yet it is complete. One may think of it as the mother of all things under heaven. Nature. Its true name I do not know. Tao is the nickname I give it. When we go to Genesis, between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, there are millions of years. It says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, meaning that it was there already. The land and the water were there already, and because no one knew how it came about, it was attributed to a magnificent force called God, the real one. We can also read about it in Jude 1:6, and the angels which kept not their first estate. This is the first estate, heaven, before the division of heaven and earth. So here I am going to propose an ideology. So this is where you're going to get some coffee and some toast, some cookies with butter or something. Get yourself comfy because this is going to blow your mind. Okay? You see, what happened is that the earth was like that. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And then everything was living. Birds were born, creatures all over the place. Life was going on. And one of these creatures that exist in the plane of existence are angels. So what happened was that angels flew by. And then they say, hey, that's a good area right there to form a nest, an angel nest. So they go down there and they perform a ritual of procreation, however it is that they do it. If we try to describe it by the terminology that we know on earth, we'll say an orgy, something like that, because women are not given into marriage up in heaven. And that would answer also that there are female angels. And whoever tells you otherwise, that they're only male angels, that is simply a patriot that wants to push down the female once again. But all creatures that exist have two genders. So the angels also have two genders, and there are female angels. Maybe in the 200 that came down, there were also females, and those were turned into sirens. That's what the book says, not me. Okay? But you see, women are not given into marriage up in heaven. Why? Because they, as angels, are free. That rule only exists on the earth because you don't know how to control yourself sexually. I think that was the original problem. Lust. Let us not jump ahead. Let us keep the chronology of this. So the angels came down and they perform their ritual and they procreate and birth placentas. And from those placentas came out mankind for the first time, the organism, man without wings. And there you have the question, where does man come from? The organism for the first time. And when you try to answer that question, you have this barometer. And if you say that you don't believe in creation or the snap of the finger of God, they push you over to the other side of the barometer, which is that you come from the monkey. But you see, both answers are loony. They are crazy because none of them you have seen. You've never seen a human being manifest out of the snap of a finger. Okay, that's magic. And for that, you say, no, you got to give me an organic process. And when you give me an organic process, you give me this idea that we change from one animal to another. That doesn't happen. And you have not seen that either. None of these two you have seen. So both of them are crazy. So I'm going to propose a new one, and that is that we come from angels. And this one you've never seen either, but you've seen a process in nature that is alike in the blossoming of the caterpillar into the butterfly. You know, the butterfly morph wings before your eyes, do they not? And this happens organically. So therefore, this option is more reasonable to think about than these two loony ideas. After they lay the seed of the human race, then they circumscribe the area. The area is a plate. It's not a sphere or a basketball or a Super Mario World. It's the plate. And when you measure pi, you're measuring a flat surface, circumscribed, a circle, like a hula hoop, throw it on the ground, and that's it. Take a dinner plate and measure the circumference all the way around the plate, and then measure the diameter, which is the line in the middle, and then divide the circumference by the diameter, and you will get 3.14 and a variation, because that's the measurement of the circle in particular. They circumscribe the area with ice before the division of heaven and earth. Not heaven and hell, heaven and earth. That is more viewable than the floating in a dark void. The terrains outside of our circle are extra lands, and those are the extraterrestrials. And there you have the cosmological sedimentation where the angels walk, who by reasons unknown, after dividing the earth from the first estate, they shave the trees inside the circle. That's what you have. Outside of the circle, the trees reach 900 meters, and inside it was shaved. That's why there's no oxygen here. But here, yes. Here, no. And that's why the angel can no longer live inside the circle, because there's not enough oxygen to sustain his biological organism. We have in the Bible, Revelation 21:17 says that the cubit measure of man is the same as the angel. And the problem with that is that if angels are spirits, a spirit cannot be measured. So how could it have a cubit measured? A cubit is the measurement of the entire forearm, from the tip of the fingers to the elbow. That's a cubit. What he's saying is that the angel can no longer live here because there is no trees in here, and thus there is no enough oxygen to sustain his biological organism. He has to be outside, where the trees out here are bigger. And we can have a vision of this when we listen to the interview of Admiral Byrd, when he said that there's a large amount of coal and that there is land never before seen by a human being. Therefore, there is no structure there. Do you follow? Also, we have the president said at the time that there is an untouched reservoir of natural resources in the area of Antarctica. Untouched reservoir. Thus, we must be talking about a physical being that existed on this land before they cut the trees, those who from heaven came to earth. Because, as it is shown, the waters and the lands were there already before the Spirit of God had came to hover in the mist and circle the ground, divided the firmaments. With what? With an ark. That's what they did. They put an ark, a dome, an ark. Do you follow? And then they assigned an archangel who is in charge of a fleet of watchers, of angels, which I call watchers because that's what they do. They are responsible to keep an eye and track of the seed. So when they say that the devil took a third of the angels, we're talking about a section. Let's make this simpler. Let's put watchers around the circle, okay? Those are watchers. Now, we're talking about a section. A section of 200 angels led by their leader, Samyasa. So Samyasa was not the archangel. That was Michael. And we can tell when in the book of Enoch it says the one you put in charge of his associates. So Samyasa is in charge of a section, a supervisor, let's call it that. And a section of 200 angels went down to mate with the daughters of men. And that was the beginning. That was the first sin committed by the angels. So when we speak about the sin, I'm going to bring you back to this, because it's something that you should not carry as a guilt. Because if you don't want me to sin, stop teaching it. I am a byproduct of what you teach me. The watchers were the one that committed the first sin. Now, somebody cut the trees, and thus everything changed now. We can no longer develop. Physically, we can no longer develop because there's no trees to sustain, and you keep cutting them. So, it's a problem that you don't understand this, and you keep cutting trees. That's a problem. Once you understand that trees breathe in CO2 and breathe out oxygen. We breathe in oxygen and we breathe out CO2, and you keep cutting it. That's why you're out of breath. You have these memes, even basketball players have it in their jerseys. I can't breathe. I'm explaining this to a friend of mine, and he says, well, if things are like that, then we're still developing, but we are now developing the individual, the mind. Mente, mind. So we are developing the mind. In order to learn stage 6, we are to develop into angelhood by developing the entire organism, and we are developing all the way to stage 6, and we are not growing 7. 7 is the pineal gland, an internal gland that is not developing the human being. We grow to maturity, but not to divinity. We crucify that 7th stage, and everything that negates that 7th stage is the 666. It's like a Wi-Fi signal, looking for a signal and never getting it. 666, bang, 666, bang, drop down again. Can't connect to the eye. And that's why even in the Bible says the number of man is 6. And this is what we're talking in the book of Enoch, that they don't develop because they had knowledge. What kind of knowledge? Astrology, bracelets, war, makeup, cutting trees, even eyeliner. All of these customs were not yet even thought by the human mind. The idea of cutting a tree was not yet in the minds of men. These concepts were introduced by the angels who from heaven came to earth. Those ideas paved the way to civilization, and there you have the answer of how the civilization started. It started there. They brought that up. And you ask these questions as if, listen to the question, how the civilization started. How did man chose to leave behind the simple life of freedom and vegetation to congregate in one place to serve a ruling class? How did that happen? Civilization. If that's not the problem, then why you ask the question? Civilization started? Well, then it started. What's the problem with that? It started. Why do you have to ask me, wow, civilization started? Well, what is the importance of that? The importance of that is that it marks the time in which our minds shifted into something else that everybody's trying to answer. Well, here's the answer. Gain your mind back. No one walks upside down, okay? This is what they tell you. That's not it. Everybody is standing up. Everybody in the world. Keep that in mind. There was one sin by them, and then time passed, and People were living and sinning now. Then they wrote a book. And in that book, they explain in a metaphor what happened. And now, when you believe a lie, you are biting off the apple. And the serpent is the city, who does not speak, but yet it has messages, signs, letterings, saying to do this, do that, bulletin boards, and swallows man, the serpent. And if you believe a lie, you are biting off the apple. That's why New York is the Apple City. It's the biggest circus in town. Do you follow? So that's the second sin. The apple is the second sin. The first sin was committed by the angels. The second sin is the apple. And that's simply a byproduct of what everybody is living. And we do not know what is a sin. We do not know that. And this sin was written and blamed on the woman. And because of that, you have this sentiment so profound that whenever something happens in the battle of the sexes, it rushes up through your spine and up to your mind and makes you violent. When the first sin was committed by the angels, you don't have any fault. They came down and they took advantage of a lesser species. Not weaker, lesser. We were still an infant in our timeline to be told knowledge that we were not supposed to know. Therefore, you cannot blame that on us for rebounding into what you put in front of me. We can understand that women were not at fault neither. Both were taken for suckers. She was seduced, not knowing, and he failed for not saving her. You see, this is the internal emotion, so profound, subconsciously driving men to save the woman. He wants to save her from what? He wants to save her from civilization. But you see, when he went in there to get her back, he was also fooled by clowns, by laughter, by the selling of themselves for power. They were given a certain kind of control that then they could not relinquish. And that's been the problem since. There was a time in which the trees on the earth reached 900 meters, and with a canopy of water and pressurized atmosphere, allowed oxygen to saturate our blood cells, and thus will be stronger. Maybe then is when our physicality can match the strength of our spirit, and then boom, development.